most underdeveloped countries, like when you talk about some parts of the Pacific coast and so on.
Jairo Arboleda is Survivor Corps Strategic Director for Colombia. He is the only staff member based in Colombia. I sat down with Jairo to discuss peace building in the context of Colombia and the experience of being the only in-country staff member for an international non-governmental organization. I had wondered if it was indeed frustrating being far away from colleagues who may not have had a chance to understand the conflict. When using the word them, Jairo is referring to DC Survivor Corps staff. Take a look.
I mean, I'm, I guess, knowledgeable enough to be able to have a team with them and all work together in this. But I don't see them not being here, or and if I find that there are, like, it's not that I know how it is and I am the one who knows, but if there are people who may have some views or ideas or some shortcomings in understanding, I see it as my part of my job to help them understand, at least from as I understand certain things, and not necessarily, I don't get frustrated easily.
When you first meet Jairo, he's soft-spoken and reserved, but these qualities shouldn't be mistaken for a lack of ideas to share. Jairo has so much to share from his decades of experience with the World Bank, Save the Children, among others, that he's probably gauging where to begin with his fellow conversationalists. As he relaxes into a conversation, Jairo's knowledge begins to flow. Here, Jairo explains how his relationship with Survivor Corps began.
Well, I first heard of Landmine Survivor Network, which was the name, and that was because there are two people working there that I knew before: Nelson, who is the head of finance, and Kristen. And as a matter of fact, Kristen and I worked a long time ago for Save the Children when I was regional director for Latin America, and she worked in the finance department. And so that's how I learned about LSN. While I worked with the bank, and because I had, I went frequently to Washington and all of that. So once in a while, I would know about them. That's pretty much. It's more like the basis of a personal contact.
Through his decades of experience working on issues related to Colombia's conflict, Jairo has developed a sophisticated perspective on approaches to the conflict that I can only hope to attain someday. And the longer I was in Colombia, the more I realized just how sophisticated the majority of programs are which aim to end or alleviate the consequences of Colombia's conflict. Jairo elaborated on this theme.
In a country like Colombia, it doesn't make any sense for an international organization to come to Colombia and not to work with existing organizations, given the level of human resources, of organization, of capacity, the level of development of the country. Even though we do have many parts of the country with a percentage of the population that live under very difficult conditions, and some people may compare that to some of the most underdeveloped countries, like when you talk about some parts of the Pacific coast and so forth. The country in general has good capacity almost everywhere, and therefore I see that like the approach should be a partnership approach, and a true partnership approach, which is you find a partner to agree on some objective that you want to achieve together. You put your strengths together, you take a risk together, and you try to achieve that objective together.
Some of the most important lessons I learned in Colombia I learned from Jairo. He was really like a personal professor to me on issues related to Colombia's conflict. Intermediate Colombia Conflict 1. One lesson that particularly left me pondering after our conversation ended was on the perception of victimhood and survivorship in Colombia. Here's Jairo.
It's going to be useful and controversial in Colombia, which is the concept of survivorship, which I'm very interested in, that I like to push here, but there's going to be a lot of resistance because victimhood is more appealing and is more effective. You have been victimized. Of course, you are entitled to rights because that's the international legal framework and the national legal institutional framework provides for those kinds of things. But it's the idea that if you remain a victim, then things may come to you. And in the case of Colombia now, the emphasis on victim is very important because the reparation program is not for survivors, it's for victims. That's interesting, and this is an issue that I want to ventilate in Washington when I come up.
I wish I could have offered more to Survivor Corps in Colombia, but in fact, this one-man operation is functioning at impressive levels through Jairo and his contacts. I want to thank Jairo for giving me a chance in Bogota and for letting me experience a first-hand view into Survivor Corps Colombia, which he and many others have worked meticulously to arrange. Gracias.